Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. Over the past few hours, at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, Czech Foreign Minister Petr Macinka delivered two major speeches marking 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In recent months, there have been questions at home and abroad about whether the new Czech government might recalibrate its position on the war. In these two addresses, first to the UN General Assembly and then to the Security Council, Minister Macinka speaks with clarity about who he considers the aggressor, who the defender, and what responsibility lies where. Because of their tone, their timing, and their significance, I would like you to hear both speeches in full here in Czechast. First, the address to the General Assembly.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for 4 years we've been hearing variations of the same thing here, but I didn't come today to repeat well-known phrases. Much has already been said about Ukraine and its situation after being attacked by Russia 4 years ago. And so, perhaps today allow me to offer a different perspective. Not to talk about the war, but to talk about time. Not to talk about Ukraine, but to talk to Russia. I'm a foreign minister, so I would like to address the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, even though I know he's not personally here today, so perhaps this will reach him. Minister Lavrov, I address you today not primarily as an adversary. I address you as a person who knows very well that no superpower wins a war against reality. You can temporarily control territory. You can temporarily control the narrative. You can create and control propaganda, but you cannot control time. And time always reveals who spoke of security and who was dismantling it. The question today is not whether Russia has security concerns, which you have used for 4 years to justify your unprecedented aggression against Ukraine. So my question is, why should the answer to these alleged concerns be drones and artillery? Concerns may be legitimate, but an invasion never is. Missiles are not an argument. I consider your missiles to be the physical admission of your own failure. Mr. Minister, the strength of a global power doesn't lie in its ability to start a war. The greatest strength lies in its ability to end one. So after 4 years, the world would like to hear simple answers from you. What does your victory look like? How many destroyed cities are enough? How many wasted lives are enough? Because if victory has no clear end, then it is not a strategy. It is a cynical autopilot. Security is not measured by the size of occupied territory. And so I now ask in all seriousness, is Russia safer today than it was 4 years ago? Does it have more partners? Does it have more stability? Does it have more trust? And if the truthful answer is negative, and indeed it is negative, then it is legitimate to ask whether the chosen path really leads to a greater security for your country. Wars do not end with a mere stroke of a pen. They end with the question, why? And one day, it will not be Ukraine answering this question. It will be Russia. Russia, whose heroes once fought side by side with European nations against Nazism, but today the shadow of a new war falls over their memory. So, Mr. Lavrov, great nations can survive defeat. They cannot, however, survive a strategy that has no end. You might seize territory, but you cannot seize the future. History is full of powers that believed time was on their side. In reality, it was always working against them. Every war begins with a plan, but yours survives today only because you lack the courage to admit that this plan has failed. And it has been 4 years, so the time is running out. The time has come to finally stop this war. Let me conclude by thanking Ukraine for presenting a draft resolution to this Assembly. The Czech Republic will vote in favor of the resolution, and I would like to ask you all to do the same. Thank you very much.
So that was Czech Foreign Minister Petr Macinka speaking to the United Nations General Assembly.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
Shortly afterwards, he addressed the Security Council. The setting was different, the audience smaller, but the message no less direct. So here is his full speech to the UN Security Council.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to speak here today. Today marks 4 years since the launch of the war against Ukraine. 4 years of bombarded cities and drone strikes, 4 years of divided families, 4 years of trenches, minefields and mass graves. We are here in an institution created to protect peace, and yet for 4 years we've been watching an open aggression against a sovereign state that it seems impossible to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, once a wall stood in Europe. It separated freedom from oppression. It separated truth from propaganda. It separated the future from the past. That wall no longer stands in Berlin. It stands in Ukraine. It takes the form of the front line. It takes the form of occupied cities. It takes the form of children who learn to recognize the sound of missiles before they learn their letters. And as the US President Reagan said in his famous speech in Berlin 1987, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, I think we should send the same message to the President Putin. Mr. Putin, break down this war. This war is not just about a territory. It is about a fundamental principle, whether nations have the right to decide their own future or whether their fate is decided by the force of arms. It is about whether borders can be redrawn by tanks, whether a neighboring state can be erased from the map, whether we are returning to a world of spheres of influence and occupation. I think Ukraine is not just defending itself today. It is defending the idea that the sovereignty matters. The freedom is not a bargaining chip. That aggression must not be rewarded. My country, the Czech Republic, knows this experience. We know what it means when others decide your fate. We know that appeasing aggression doesn't bring peace, it only delays the next conflict. History teaches us a simple lesson. No occupation lasts forever, no wall stands forever, and no army can break the will of a nation that has chosen to be free. And that is why I want to speak plainly today. And I'm sorry that Mr. Nebenzia left the room, because I would like him to tell to his people, to Russian people in Moscow, to stop this war and give peace a chance. Not as a gesture of weakness, but as a step of responsibility. The world is watching you, the history is watching you. And with every additional day of this war, the unnecessary bill of human suffering grows. Some say that peace is not possible, but peace always begins with a decision to stop the destruction, a decision to stop sending young men to their death, a decision to open the way for diplomacy instead of artillery. Aggression is not a sign of strength, it is an admission of fear. Ladies and gentlemen, today is not just about Ukraine, it is about the message we send to the world. Whether we say that the war pays off, or that the civilized world stands with the victims, not the aggressors. Whether we accept that the law is silent when weapons speak, or whether we can show that the values have weight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to urge you to exhaust every diplomatic avenue in pursuit of a just and lasting peace. In this regard, I commend the US President Trump and his team for their tireless effort to bring the parties to the table. Talks, however imperfect, are infinitely preferable to alternative. The future doesn't have to belong to the trenches. It can belong to reconstruction, it can belong to cooperation, it can belong to a generation that will no longer know the sound of sirens and drones, as the representative from Liberia mentioned. But that future begins with a single decision. So please, honorable representatives from Russia, tell to your President Putin to stop the war.
You've just heard Czech Foreign Minister Petr Macinka speaking in full at the United Nations, first at the General Assembly, then at the Security Council, 4 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Given the international context and the ongoing debate about Czech foreign policy, I felt it was important to let the minister speak for himself without excerpts or interpretation. Thank you for listening to this special episode of Czechast. And if you'd like to hear more conversations and analysis about Czechia and the world, follow Czechast wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps me to bring you more stories and episodes like this one. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious, and as we say in Czech, naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.